total movement time total movement time is really when can an officer first articulate that they've witnessed some type of movement pattern that gives them the potential knowledge that, hey, something bad is potentially about to happen. They're trying to make a prediction. And so, first of all, are you teaching your officers what does certain movement patterns look like that would give someone access to a weapon? And if you're not doing that, you're really missing an opportunity, because I have witnessed some officers really not articulate movement patterns to a weapon until the hand is already into the waistband. You know, are we telling someone, hey, put your hands in the small of your back, and then they're immediately beginning to put both hands in the small of their back? Well, think about that movement pattern. How consistent is that with moving the hands towards the waistband, whether it's basically to the front? So first of all, look at how you're teaching officers how to give commands to someone. Are they given a command that could be construed as potentially um, movement that's compliance or non-compliance, and be able to articulate the difference of the two? But remember that first stimulus of non-compliance all the way until the force being deployed is total movement time, and we really don't look at that particularly. Total movement time is not what we're looking at, because we're already getting shot at when we see this basically in 1.86 seconds within the video. But if we start breaking down all the times that we really need to pay attention to, first of all, let's look at the movement time of non-compliance to when a weapon is being presented. Now, in the video, I did multiple reps and got a little bit of a range, but basically, could be construed as non-compliance movement, that was your beginning time all the way to when a weapon was basically seen, ranged between 9/10 and 1.2 seconds, depending on whether I went left, right, left-handed, right-handed, rolled left, rolled right, and so forth. But you can see, I mean, let's just say it's a second. Well, then you have movement time where the weapon is visible to the weapon is fired. And it ranged, of course, multiple different times and so forth. But we can just say basically, I think here was 0.8 to 1 second. And then you have total movement time, of course, and it kind of ranged between the two. So now what we really are looking at, though, is movement time that gives an officer an opportunity to react. In other words, reaction time, or the ability or an opportunity to react. But we also have to keep in mind reaction time of the officer. And it's very complicated, and this kind of goes beyond the scope of this video. But ultimately, there's many factors, but in the most simplest of forms, if it's just a very, very simple stimulus and that officer only has to do one thing and he's more or less anticipating it, you could get down reaction time to a blink of an eye, a quarter of a second potentially. But it can range all the way up to 2 seconds. I think a lot of the research out there more or less will suggest it could be a half a second, upwards to a second. But this goes back to your training. Are you teaching your officer where to pay attention to? Are you teaching them how to direct their attention to certain body movement patterns, or even certain portions of the body? If we go back up to let's go back up to the video just real quick. Now look here. This individual began moving, and I just decided, like, hey, when the hands are, let's just say we've told them not to put their hands behind their back, and they start moving their hands in that downward direction. If that is the first stimulus of, hey, something bad or something of non-compliance is about to occur, you can see that it's basically 7/10 of a second later, and potentially the officer could see the weapon. Now, this camera is positioned directly at the 6 o'clock of the suspect at the base of the feet. I'd like for you to keep in mind, how do you teach your officers to position themselves? If they're directly behind the suspect, then it's going to take a very large movement of that suspect that they're going to have to make in order to see the weapon. If we're doing contact and cover and you got two officers, some of the research and this video would suggest you would position your cover officer more at a 45-degree angle to the right of your suspect. You'll see here in a second the research shows that this is a more of an optimal tactic, but you might could gain a potential tenth or 2/10 of a second more and identify that weapon, because as soon as the weapon is potentially visible, we come online to where he's got the hand on the weapon and he's already starting to clear the waistband. Now, that 1.3 seconds is from the beginning of the time mark, the goose egg mark. So even here it's 1.3 seconds, and that individual has already rolled into a supine position, ready to clear the holster. So if we're looking at decision-making opportunities or a window of opportunity for an officer to react, we're really down to 6/10 of a second. And so we've got to understand that if that officer's making the approach, that's not going to be an opportunity to defend themselves. Let's go look at the research real quick. So the research suggests, and this research was based on someone in a prone position with the hands hidden. So the hands were already underneath the suspect. And I personally wanted to see, well, how fast can a suspect move if the hands are completely visible and they're in a solid prone handcuffing position? And you can see the research with the hands being hidden, they showed total movement time of a half a second to 7/10 of a second. I found that to be interesting because if we look down where we had the visible to being fired was down to 8/10 of a second to 1 second. And I thought it was pretty interesting how, not that big of a difference with the hands completely out in the open versus completely hidden. So how does this apply to tactics? Well, one, the research suggests that the suspect was the slowest, right-handed suspect, was the slowest when they reached for the handgun with the right hand and had to roll to the right shoulder in order to get a shot off to the left side, shooting out the left side near their waist. So what that tells us is that is the more optimal approach. In other words, the yellow arrow supports or shows our contact officer, meaning the handcuffing officer, should be making a left-handed approach from the direction of the yellow arrow. Our cover officer, who would be giving commands, telling the individual what to do, would ultimately be on the right, giving those commands. And let me ask you this. We wouldn't want to say, sir, put both hands in the small of your back. That allows that right hand to get close to the waistband. So we're taking away a window of opportunity. We're taking away more of our time. We want to increase our time. It might need to be, sir, put your left hand in the small of your back. Or maybe we say, don't move your hands at all. And we allow the contact officer to begin making the approach to secure the left hand with the handcuff as quickly as possible. And any movement with that right hand at that point in time would be considered non-compliance. Maybe we need to get into a position where before we get them in a prone handcuffing position, that we might be able to see if they have any weapons. I don't know. The question that really remains is read the research to find out if your tactics are going to be correct or not, or what I would really say, optimal or not. So food for thought. Maybe we say only left hand in the small of their back and we go to secure from the left-handed side. Or maybe we don't tell them to move their hands at all and we still handcuff from the left side. With that being said, are we teaching officers how to handcuff someone in the prone handcuffing from the left side approach? A lot of places only teach prone handcuffing from the right-handed side. And that shows one of the most easiest ways to get us killed. So are we teaching how to handcuff from both sides in a prone handcuffing position? Not to mention, are we teaching this right here? When we've got someone in this position, they can still get a round off, get access to a weapon and get a round off in less than 2 seconds. So we need to be teaching officers how to recognize the movement patterns to increase our decision-making window to make decisions, hopefully optimal decisions. So ultimately, here's the research. Check it out, man. Don't whatever tactics you're teaching, I'm not saying they're wrong or they're right, but I am saying, are they optimal? Look through the research and use it to take your training to the next level. Because remember, if you're teaching someone certain tactics, you might be teaching them how to get themselves killed. And I would say that's a no go.